15 years ago, a gentleman was 75 years old, charged with the possession of child pornography and charged with distribution. The community just crucified the school teacher. After 9 months of fighting, after somebody burned his garage down, shot his house up, shot his wife in the arm, got fired from his job, to find out there was no child pornography on his computer at all. The reason he said there was is his grandson had stayed with him during the summer, and his grandson was 18 and he was willing to take the rap for him, and he thought he did it. We proved that he didn't do it. It was actually his neighbor downloading on his Wi-Fi. But that was back in the day where the FBI simply just took a report that they got from a tool called torrential downpour receptor, and they ran with it. There's a lot of things going on upstream that we often don't see. So we're looking at organizations, there's 1,120 non-for-profits that are working in the world of child sexual abuse material detection. And if you worked a child case, 10% of this room would have a case that started from a non-for-profit, but you'll never know it. You never see their names in any of the police reports that we see. This is a screenshot from actually a non-for-profit's website. This shows you how many people are currently downloading or uploading what they consider child sexual abuse material that matches their database. This is the hits over, I think, a 20-minute period. Here's the problem with the numbers we see in these type of cases. They're super inflated because they also include the government advertising that they have files to download. So if the government has 100 bait servers running that's running torrential downpour receptor, it's going to show up and they're sharing out, let's say, 10,000 files. When we see numbers that say 30 million people were downloading child pornography today, that's not true. That's not even close. Oftentimes I hear, unfortunately, the legal community talk about peer-to-peer networks, and they get a lot of things wrong. What is a peer-to-peer file sharing network? Basically, it's a way to share files without taxing one person with a lot of work. Instead of relying on a central server, like we normally have at a corporate workplace where I want to download a file, there's a server that can give me that file, that's where my file hosting is. Instead, many people can have the same file or parts of the file, and we can all share with each other, direct connection, me to you without a server in between. Universities created this. This isn't some bad guy in some dark space that created peer-to-peer file sharing. There is nothing illegal about peer-to-peer software programs. They're used all over the world for all types of things. Any day of the week, there's 600 million users of peer-to-peer. We often confuse torrent files with actually the bad content. The torrent file is instructions. So the actual torrent file is like a text file, and it gives you a listing of all the pieces and parts that you need to download to reconstruct like a movie. So let's say we have a movie, it breaks it up into 100 pieces. You go to Google, you search, you find the torrent file gets added to the peer-to-peer software, which is instructions, and it takes off. Because you're not downloading from one person, you're downloading from anybody that's involved in what's called a swarm. It may take a while to download, it may download really quick, because it depends how many people are actually sharing that movie. Somebody has to have either the complete movie or enough people have to have the pieces and parts to put it back together. Let's talk about law enforcement. They have their own peer-to-peer software, and some non-for-profit organizations have this too. These programs were called Roundup predictive tools, typically Roundup Emule, Roundup torrential downpour receptor. You see these in a lot of police reports. Sometimes you don't see any of these. They just say undercover investigative software because they don't want to share it with you. The number one benefit for you defending these cases is these tools create log files. These log files have an extreme amount of information about the interaction between the suspect computer and them. What parts of the file were downloaded, whether they got a complete download, whether it got disconnected. This is highly important, so let me explain to you why. If I'm downloading the movie Men in Black and I hit cancel, I'm now no longer sharing the files. Law enforcement's log files will show I disappeared and disconnected. They don't know whether I ever fully completed downloading the file. When you're downloading the file, each file comes down and it's actually got an extension .part. You can't play that. You cannot play a .part file. There's nothing on Windows that can allow you to play a .part file, but a forensic program can. So if the defendant doesn't have a forensic program on their computer, they didn't knowingly possess because they never opened up a .part file because it's not a complete download. It can't happen. That happens a couple different ways. One, buyer's remorse. They start downloading and they're like, yeah, that's not a good idea. Let's click cancel. Or number two, their internet connection stops. Or number three, they were part of a swarm where they were downloading pieces and parts and sharing those pieces and parts, and the swarm fell apart. So they never finished downloading at all. And some of these files are thousands of parts. So these log files actually tell you how much of the content the suspect has. So Let's talk about the investigative process. Law enforcement uses peer-to-peer tools to search for suspects. They download complete or partial movie or images, and then they use geolocate IP addresses from what the movie images originated. Peer-to-peer requires that you give up your IP address. It is peer-to-peer, it's point-to-point. You can't hide behind a VPN. So law enforcement knows the suspect's IP address immediately. They take that IP address, they go get an administrative subpoena, they find out what home it came from, but all they know is there's some kind of modem in the house that's connected that has the IP address that's sharing it. They don't know what computer behind that. You want to know why they don't go after corporations that show up on their radar? Because they walk into building a corporation, you have 1,000 computers to analyze. They can't tell you who's behind the router, who's behind the IP address. It's one public IP, but there's thousands, up to 65,000 private IPs behind the one public IP. So instead, they get a search warrant application, they execute the search warrant, they hope they find some stuff when they show up. They do an on-site preview of the digital devices, so they plug in a couple of computer programs, they run it and say, oh, there's pictures. The defense process for us on the technical side of things is one, we analyze the paper discovery first. I want to see all the files. Search warrant applications on down. We have to know that because some of those things in there tell us exactly what happened, whether or not these things could be true or not based on the technology. So we're looking at the technology, we're looking at the ones and zeros of things per se, and we're saying that can't happen. Second of all, do a motion to compel. Ask for the deconfliction data from ICAC cops. That'll tell you exactly who started this investigation. Not where it landed and ended in your jurisdiction, where it started. That's highly important because if it started out of the country, you got some issues here, even out of your state. They may have some jurisdictional issues. Next, ask for all communications with NGOs, NCMEC, and ICAC. CVIP requests. It is mandated by law that they have to submit these images to Child Victim Identification Program. That tells you whether you have a real victim or not. And with artificial intelligence nowadays, this is very important. Next thing, witness statements. Always ask for them. We find them buried in files all the time. Always review the search warrant application and scope. Sometimes we have issues. The search warrant application will say that they can go to the house and seize the digital devices, but they pick the guy up in his car who's parked on the street and they dump his phone and find out some information on the phone. That is clearly outside the search warrant. And the forensic reports. Remember, forensic reports are summary exhibits, usually of voluminous data, FRE 1006 stuff. If it contains contraband, yes, you can get the contraband sent to the defense experts' place of business to be examined. A lot of people say, no, that's not true. That's absolutely true. Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Program says so. We've had the conference calls with them. And also, they have a thing called ICAC Operational Standards Guide. And the Operational Standards Guide at section 8.1.1.1 says, as long as there's a court order authorizing release, they can release the contraband evidence to the defense expert. So this myth of you have to have an expert fly across the country and spend a bunch of money and come there is nonsense. Please remember all these things. How those things make a difference to defending a case. I'm here to help the community in any way. We are in this fight with you.